so if that's too loud or it's echoing. Weird. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Okay. On this
All right. So welcome. Hello, I'm Jennie MacFarland, and I coordinate the Arizona Important Bird Areas program. And we are going to be looking at how to do yellow-billed cuckoo surveys in Arizona. Welcome. All right. So yellow-billed cuckoos, here we go. And I know some of you guys have never heard of it, but I wanted to give a very brief overview of what IBA is. Many of you have seen this slide, but for those of you who have not, IBA is Important Bird Area, not birding area. And what it really boils down to is their habitats identified as critical habitat for birds of conservation need. So it's basically about habitat as well as sometimes species specific. So they can sometimes, we do, all over the state of Arizona, we do lots of citizen science driven bird surveys. Sometimes they're just all bird surveys where we go to an area, survey a route, and just write down everything we see. Sometimes they're species specific too, though. We've done owl surveys, trogon surveys, and in this case, cuckoo surveys. We have done these in the past also. There are 45 important bird areas in the state of Arizona, 14 of which are of global importance. And it is a multi-tiered program. You don't really have to know that, but there are global IBAs all over the world. 178 countries participate in this program. And then, of course, then it breaks down. So the U.S. program is part of those 178 national programs. And then there's an Arizona program within that national program. And it is unique in the fact that it is run by 2 Audubons here in Arizona, and we have had over 500 volunteers in the past 10 years. So it's a very volunteer-driven program. It's pretty cool, which is why we're all here today, going to help with these surveys. Okay, so there are 45 in Arizona. They range from the entire state, south to north, east to west. Some of them are teeny tiny. Some of them are just like 2 or 3 square miles, and some of them are ginormo. So the Sonoran Desert, it's the Borderlands IBA. That's huge. It's Cabeza Prieta IBA combined with Oregon Pipe. So some of them are enormous, some are small. Many of them are riparian, and many, all different types of habitats. We have grassland ones, sky island, mountain ones. So all over the state and very, very varied in their habitat. Okay. So we are going to be having the Summer of the Cuckoo this year. All right, seriously. So the last 3 years we did survey the lower San Pedro. And counterintuitively, the lower San Pedro was north of Tucson. It is, we were specifically in the San Manuel area. Has anyone ever heard of that? Kind of near Mammoth. So on the other side of the Catalina Mountains from Tucson, we were on a mining property where the river was really quite lush, and it was that kind of classic cuckoo habitat we all think of, with the flowing river and the overhanging cottonwoods and willow trees, and pretty classic, what we think of as western yellow-billed cuckoo habitat. And this year, the western yellow-billed cuckoo was listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened, which is why suddenly there's so much interest in surveying for this bird. Now, we were already doing it in the lower San Pedro, and part of that was because that is such a significant riparian habitat for this species. So we were surveying for them and found quite a few of them in there. But we're not doing that this year. We're doing something totally different. We are doing the Coronado National Forest, and we have a partnership with them. We have a contract with them to survey 8 different areas, 5 routes each within 8 areas. So that's a lot of surveys, which is why we're reaching out for you folks to help us. There are some critical habitat implications, and what that means is because the cuckoo has been listed, specifically the western yellow-billed cuckoo, and we'll talk about that, has been listed, there is a legal designation that happens on federal land called critical habitat. And it doesn't so much affect private lands, but it definitely affects public-owned lands, where when an area is designated, like mapped out, literally sort of drawn out as critical habitat for a species protected under the Endangered Species Act, all sorts of restrictions kick in onto what they're allowed to do to that land. They have to assess if it's going to affect that species. One bird that this has been happening for in Arizona is the southwest willow flycatcher. There are some critical habitat designations. It was a big fight a few years ago where some agencies want critical habitat, some don't, and it becomes a struggle. But in the end of the day, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decides where that critical habitat is going to be. It is data, it's based on data, as well as some other things, habitat, implications, but it is a legal designation. The Coronado feels like they should have more critical habitat. They want more. in their areas. And part of the reason they've asked us to go in there and do these surveys is we're going to be doing areas that are less traditional for cuckoo surveys. We're doing higher elevations, canyons where there is riparian vegetation because there's a creek bed there, but it's not flowing during the summer, which is unusual for what we all think of as cuckoo habitat in the West. So it is a really interesting project that we're doing this summer, and it has real-world conservation outcomes because this could actually create more critical habitat on the Coronado National Forest and protect these areas if indeed we do find cuckoos out there using them. Or if we don't, then that's also very important data too. And they also want us to do some habitat assessment data so we can find out if, maybe try to find a link to what kind of habitat they're using in the Sky Islands so that then they can make larger assumptions about, well, maybe these drainages should be listed as critical habitat too, that we don't get to. So it's a really cool project, and it's going to be a lot of work, but it is definitely, it could actually have real on-the-ground conservation outcomes. Okay. So what's going on with cuckoos? This is an eBird map. I took this from ebird.org, and this is a range map of yellow-billed cuckoos in general, which brings up an interesting point. There's one species called a yellow-billed cuckoo. There's just one. And then you start getting into the subspecies game. Okay? So this is a range map for the species yellow-billed cuckoo. As you can see, they are extremely abundant in the West, or excuse me, the East. In the eastern part of the United States, they're very widespread and reasonably common. But out here in the West, it gets much, much more spotty. Okay, so let's zoom in. Okay, so what they're talking about, and this was in the protocol too, what they're talking about is a distinct population segment. And that's a legal term, and what it basically means is subspecies. That's what we would all call it, it's a subspecies. And a distinct population segment means that it can be listed when the entire yellow-billed cuckoo species is not. So it is just the western yellow-billed cuckoo that is being listed as threatened. So they did this for willow flycatchers too. It's not the entire willow flycatcher species, it's the southwest willow flycatcher. So they're doing that the same thing for the cuckoo, where it is the western yellow-billed cuckoo. And your protocol goes into a little bit of detail as to why this has happened. And a lot of it has to do with habitat. Out here in the West, cuckoos are pretty strongly tied to riparian areas, and meaning that there's actually some water present or riparian vegetation present. And a lot of that area habitat has been lost. And in California especially, they estimate up to 99% of that habitat that was there historically is gone. So potentially less than 1% remains. Arizona's a little bit different, where they think upwards of maybe 10% could remain. So we do have more cuckoos in Arizona. They are almost non-existent in California now, the western yellow-billed. Yes, Kate?
When you showed us the eBird map, there's a dark and light. What?
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is a functionality of eBird, and I cut it off. There's a scale. The darker the block, the higher percentage of checklists contain that species.
Okay. So that's
it has
density,
to do with
not
density.
Season or...
No, it has to do with density. So in those darker blocks, birds are being reported more frequently.
Okay.
So this actually just might correspond to cities where there's more people birding, not necessarily more birds.
Yeah, eBird tries to calibrate for that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, there could be just more popular birding areas. Yeah, could be. Okay, so does everyone understand this? That the fact that this is where the legal designation is, the line kind of cutting through New Mexico, and so any cuckoo on the west side of that line is considered part of this subspecies, this distinct population segment, protected under the Endangered Species Act. All right, so this is a great little graphic, and it shows a little bit of how different the two subspecies act. So this is also from eBird. Let's just watch it first. Okay, so this is an animation showing through time. So it starts in January and the end of the bar is December. So through time, showing presence of cuckoos in the United States. So you can see here, at first, the eastern cuckoo starts showing up, starts coming into North America, or into the United States. And then later, in June, it starts coming into Arizona. So this is two different populations moving up into the United States. And the western cuckoo arrives much later. Much, much later. And this is actually timed with the monsoon. That's what they're doing. Is they're coming in June with the idea that by the time they have young, it'll be July, and we'll have the rains, and there'll be a lot of insects to feed the young. So they behave quite differently. And this is the distinct population segment, There's a lot of size differences, especially in the females. So you can, like in the hand, they can tell the difference between the two, but there's also a lot of behavior differences, which is always key in deciding if something is a separate subspecies.
So do they winter in a different place?
Oh yes, they go down, they travel quite far. They'll go to South America.
But I mean.
Oh, the two subspecies? I'm not sure. That's the sort of thing that people put tracking devices on birds. They're starting to figure stuff like that out now, but I'm not sure. I don't know about this species. All right, so then this is another eBird map, and it's a zoom in of Arizona. And you can see they do show up in California and into Nevada and Utah, and these are all western yellow-billed. But there's quite a few of them in Arizona. I mean, comparatively. And there's a huge cluster of them in southeast Arizona. And they do some of the things you would totally expect cuckoos to do. One is they're following the rivers. So there's the San Pedro going up, and then they're following the Santa Cruz going up, which is exactly what you would expect. Yes, Sarah's question.
Is that why we're seeing the gapping between the two regions? I mean, on Arizona, we're seeing them toward the left side and then toward the right, so west and east. But then, like, even on the map before this, there was a larger gap in the density. You see it?
Right, yeah, there's just...
and that's just because they're following the habitat?
Yes, they're following the habitat, but another good reason that there could be a huge gap up there in the upper corner of Arizona is that's all tribal lands, and access is extremely limited.
Okay.
There's always big gaps in Arizona.
What's the difference in the red and the blue?
Okay, the red are ones that were seen in the last 30 days.
Oh.
And the blue are ones, so I took this map, I think, yesterday. So yesterday, there was birds reported, yellow-billed cuckoos reported there in the last 30 days. And the larger balloons just mean they're hotspots, like established hotspots that everybody goes birding. And the smaller balloons are personal locations that people pinpointed on a map. Okay. So they're following the rivers, as you would expect. But down here in southeast Arizona, they're doing something else. They are following the rivers, but they are also clustering in the Sky Islands. Now, the Sky Islands don't have rivers that flow through them per se, but they do have creeks. They do attract a lot of moisture. This southeast Arizona Sky Island region, they tend to get a little bit more rainfall than the area around them, and they're a little bit more lush. So the thought is that they're using the Sky Islands in a way that we're hearing that they're using habitat in Mexico. Because they do, make nests and snore out, down in northern Mexico too. And people will say that they will use, areas away from rivers and streams. So we're thinking, at least I'm thinking, that they're using the southeast Arizona Sky Islands in a similar way, because they are moist enough and there's enough insects, that they're using these slightly higher elevation, without flowing water creek areas to nest. So that's one of the main drives behind what we're going to be looking for. So where are we surveying? 8 Sky Islands. Some of them are more Sky Islandy than the others, which we'll talk about. Some of them are higher than others. So the Coronado National Forest suspects that cuckoos will use higher elevation habitat than previously thought in southeast Arizona, partially based on a comment letter that was sent by Tucson Audubon Society, where we looked at eBird data and some other data, as well as some personal observations, and said that we felt that there should be more critical habitat designated in the Sky Islands because we think they're using this habitat. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is considering that. And then the Coronado heard about this too, and they thought this was a great idea, and they want to see if they indeed are using more habitat in the Coronado. Yes.
I might have missed something while I was out, but on the way to Montosa Canyon, there's a road that goes to Amato. Somewhere around there last year, we found a cuckoo nest on the road. I don't think there's any water anywhere, but it called right as we drove by. And it was a nest in a what do you call it? Sorry, I'm over 65.
What kind of tree was it in?
The regular tree.
The cottonwood?
No, the other one. The
Mesquite.
Mesquite.
Oh, it was a mesquite. Okay, right, exactly. So there's some definite interesting things going on in southeast Arizona that hasn't been looked at that closely. That's a lot of what we're going to be doing. And Tucson Audubon, myself and John Yerger at the last festival, Tucson Bird and Wildlife Festival in August, found a cuckoo nest in Montosa Canyon in August 2014. And there's no water there. I mean, there's a creek bed, so the water does flow through there when it rains, but it's not a flowing stream. And there's the photo that we took.
Was it active?
Yeah, she's sitting on the nest.
I can't.
Oh, she is.
Yeah, I took
I
this
see
photo
it,
with
I
my
see it,
phone,
I see.
but she's
Yeah, I
sitting
see.
on a little stick nest in the middle of the photo, in an oak tree. She built that nest in an oak.
Show her where her head is.
So here's her chin and her chest. There's her bill, and there's her head. So we'll talk about why cuckoos are hard to see. And that's a great example. Cuckoos are kind of difficult to see. We're going to talk about that. And the only reason we saw her at all is because the male called. He was higher up in the tree. He called. That's the only reason we saw her. She was just sitting very, very quietly. We had a whole field trip of people there. And she was right off the road in Montosa Canyon, in an oak tree. So that was pretty great. So we included this photo with our comments. And this is an area we will be surveying, Montosa.
But why did you, what was it that you told them it was higher? So how high was that? Montosa Canyon's not that high.
It's not that high, but that's not really, it's not in a cottonwood willow drainage, which is where they're supposed to be.
Okay.
And it's not near flowing water. I mean, there is a creek bed right off the road right there. So the water does flow there, so there is lush vegetation and a lot of insect life, which is really what the cuckoos are actually looking for. It's not like they're looking for water specifically. They're looking for what water brings, which is lush vegetation and prey items. So they were clearly able to find it here in Montosa Canyon, and so they're nesting.
Where is Montosa?
It's in the Santa Rita Mountains.